Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Raham Morsi, and if you're watching the show for the very first time, let me reintroduce you to what the show is all about. The show is composed of a number of different segments. First, we take a closer look at the world of politics. Next comes business and finance, and we also learn more about what's happening in the world of technology, the latest in cultural and arts events, in addition to a closer look at the world of sports. First, we start off with politics after the break. We start off with damage caused by the devastating earthquake in Turkey that will exceed $100 billion, according to UN Development Program officials, and who said this at a press briefing on Tuesday ahead of a major donor conference next week. UNDP's Louisa Vinton said that it's clear from the calculations being done to date that the damage figure presented by the government and supported by international partners would be in excess of $100 billion. More than 52,000 people were killed in Turkey and Syria by the February 6th earthquakes, with many being crushed or buried in their sleep. The provisional damage figure, which Vinton said covers just Turkey, is being used as a basis for a donor conference to mobilize funds for earthquake victims in Brussels, Belgium, on March 16th. The World Bank previously estimated the Turkey damage at around $34.2 billion. Vinton described the scenes in Turkey's worst-hit Hatay province as apocalyptic, saying hundreds of thousands of homes had been destroyed. Israeli warplanes struck Aleppo airport before dawn on Tuesday, causing significant damage that halted flights carrying aid for people affected by last month's earthquake to and from Syria's second city. Syria's transport ministry said on Tuesday it would reroute flights carrying earthquake aid following an overnight aerial attack that put Aleppo International Airport out of commission. In the second attack on Aleppo airport in 6 months, Syrian air defenses intercepted missiles launched from the Mediterranean west of the coastal city of Latakia at 2:07 a.m. local time. The attack caused material damage to the airport in a statement reported by state media. The transport ministry said humanitarian aid flights would be rerouted to Damascus and Latakia after the Israeli aggression. Foreign donors, including the United Arab Emirates, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Algeria, have flown aid into Aleppo airport since the February 6th earthquake. The Syrian Foreign Ministry, in a statement, condemned the attack as a double crime, saying it had hit a civilian airport and one of the primary channels for delivering humanitarian assistance to people affected by the earthquake. The earthquake killed 1,414 people in government-held parts of the country. More than 4,500 were reported dead by the earthquake in parts of Syria under rebel control in the northwest. The attack overnight was Israel's third airstrike in Syria this year, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Last year, Israel carried out more than 30 airstrikes in Syria. In January, the Syrian army said an Israeli missile attack briefly put Damascus airport out of service. Damascus airport was also struck last year, making it impossible for the United Nations to fly in aid deliveries to needy Syrians for around 2 weeks, the UN's Commission for Inquiry said at the time. Palestinian Foreign Ministry warned of the dangerous campaigns launched by extremist Jewish organizations to carry out expanded incursions into the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque on Tuesday and Wednesday, coinciding with the Jewish feast. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry said these are indicative calls which may be followed by provocative incursions into Al-Aqsa Mosque and are supported by an extremist right government to incite tensions and successive crises. The ministry held the occupation government the full accountability of this incursion, demanding international and American intervention to stop them. Still on the occupied Palestinian lands, in another development, Israeli settlers attacked Palestinians in the West Bank village of Hawara overnight on Monday. The scenes of a violent rampage last week by dozens of settlers seeking revenge for the shooting of two Israeli brothers. Hawara, a Palestinian village near a major road checkpoint, has become the latest flashpoint between the Israelis and Palestinians after months of worsening violence in the occupied West Bank. Israeli army and border police forces dispersed crowds of what the military described as a number of violent riots in Hawara. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken overnight reiterated calls for both sides to de-escalate tensions in the West Bank, where Israeli forces have killed more than 65 Palestinians, including militant fighters and civilians this year. And joining us over the phone to tell us more about the tensions in the occupied lands is Ambassador Hamdi Saleh, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister. Good evening to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good evening.
How do you see the current situation in the West Bank and with the Israelis and Palestinians? We're seeing major escalations, including today, with 6 being killed during an Israeli raid by the army.
This is really tragic. The rise of the right movements in Israel and the right cabinet, extreme rights, is really leading to a tragedy in the West Bank and Gaza and for Israel itself. The Israeli public are really divided, demonstrating against the government. Mm-hmm. The government, in spite of that, it has so many members of the cabinet who are very extremist. One of them is the minister who wanted to level a particular city or village near his house just because it's near his house. Mm. So the tension is very high, and as a result of that, the Americans are moving and to try to see what they can do. The Secretary of Defense, Austin, is visiting Israel in a couple of days. He's now in Iraq. He will go to Israel and then come to Egypt. Egypt is moving to try to contain the conflict. However, this is a very tragic development that, we have large number of Palestinians were killed
yes.
with the atrocities of the Israelis.
Yes, sir. And this brings me to the next point, which is we've seen the international community in general condemn the recent violations by the Israeli army and settlers, yet there are no real steps or actions taken to de-escalate the situation so far.
No doubt, the entire world community is denouncing the situation. But however, the problem is the world is so much, engaged in following the war in Europe between the Ukraine and the Russians.
Yes.
The world community is busy with other conflicts everywhere. And as a result of that, the Israeli cabinet led by Benjamin Netanyahu and with the extremist group are really seizing the opportunity to do what they can do. These are atrocities which will be held responsible for. Mm-hmm. And historically that will not look good for the Israeli in the future. And it will not lead to any settlement or any peace.
Yes.
I think the advice which the Americans are bringing to them, and of course the advice which Egypt has been advising to them,
yes.
is that there is a need for peaceful settlement, not conflict, not continuing the violence and killing of each other.
Yes, there have also been other attempts to de-escalate the violence, like the talks that took place in Jordan between the Israelis and Palestinians to reach some sort of consensus. But we've seen during the talks itself protests by the Palestinians against these talks. Why do you believe that the Palestinians or the average citizen was protesting these talks, and why weren't they successful in halting the violence?
This is very much expected that, the Palestinian public are very concerned about the rightist cabinet and what they are doing and what they are talking. And in spite of the fact that there was an Aqaba and a meeting which was trying to reduce the tension and to de-escalate, yes. Yet there is nothing at all coming out of this. The Israelis are not really heading towards any settlement or any de-escalation. And as a result of that, there is a real concern among the Palestinian public everywhere, mm-hmm. whether it's the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, about what could happen in the future. I think that there should be a real pressure from the world community, particularly the Americans, the Europeans, and an involvement from Egypt to try yes. to contain the conflict and to de-escalate the situation.
But sir, do you think that de-escalation is actually possible given the fact that the current Israeli government is far right? And some may consider them even extremely racist. Do you think that given the situation that there is a possibility of actually de-escalation, or will they continue on in violating UN charters?
This is the right question. It's very difficult to predict what will happen with this cabinet, with this group of extremists. And as a result of that, most of the countries in the world are really concerned about this cabinet, and they are not willing to cooperate with them. Even the Americans denounce all the statements coming from them, and they try to tell them that, that's not the way to live to their own standards. And as a result of that, I think there would be some real fragmentation in the Israeli cabinet, and maybe, I cannot predict, but maybe will be a change, political change.
Here's to hoping that there's change. Ambassador Hamdi Saleh, former assistant to the foreign minister, thank you so much for highlighting the situation in the occupied lands. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. And moving back home, President al-Sisi received the visiting Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani and the accompanying delegation in Cairo on Sunday. Presidential spokesman Councillor Ahmed Fahmy said the talks focused on Cairo's unwavering support for the stability and security of Iraq. He said the President al-Sisi expressed keenness during the talks on boosting ties in the political, economic, trade and cultural fields and on speeding up the implementation of the joint project. He said common development objectives and continuing with the tripartite cooperation mechanism, including Jordan, were also discussed. The meeting was attended by the Prime Minister, Mustafa Madbouli, the Foreign Minister, Sameh Shukri, Public Intelligence Chief, Abbas Kamel, and the Minister of Trade and Industry, Samir Wazir. The Iraqi delegation included Iraq's Deputy Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. For his part, the Iraqi Prime Minister lauded historical ties between the two sides and said he appreciates the Egyptian efforts to support Iraq on various fields. Both sides also discussed a number of Arab and regional issues of concern and stressed their keenness in continuing with coordination to face challenges in the region. An official reception was also held for the Iraqi Prime Minister upon his arrival at Cairo Airport. Over to Europe, anyone arriving illegally in Britain will be prevented from staying, according to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in a published interview on Sunday, ahead of new legislation which is expected to be set out this week. Under pressure from his own lawmakers to find a solution for the flow of migrants arriving in Britain across the Channel from Europe, Sunak has made stopping small boats one of his 5 key priorities. Under current practice, asylum seekers who reach Britain are often able to remain in the country to have their case heard. A new law to tackle the issue is due to be set out on Tuesday after more than 45,000 people made the perilous crossing last year. Asylum applications to the United Kingdom are below the European Union average, official data shows. Last year, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson agreed a deal to send tens of thousands of migrants, many having made the journey from Afghanistan, Syria or other countries suffering war, more than 4,000 miles away to Rwanda. The policy has faced a legal battle after the first planned deportation flight was blocked by a last-minute injunction granted by the European Court of Human Rights. It was ruled lawful by London's High Court in December, but opponents are seeking to appeal the verdict. The Mail on Sunday reported that under the new law, asylum claims from those who arrive on small boats would be ruled inadmissible and they would be removed and permanently banned from returning. And moving on, the French Union stepped up their fight against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform plans on Tuesday as most trains came to a halt. Fuel deliveries were disrupted and schools shut in a 6th day of nationwide strikes. This is a critical time for the government, which is hoping the reform can be adopted by Parliament by the end of March. To increase pressure on lawmakers not to raise the pension age by 2 years to 64, unions said there would be rolling strikes this time, which could go on for days, including at oil refineries and railways. Garbage collectors and truck drivers joined the strike in a sign the protests were spreading to more sectors. Like in previous strikes, power production was reduced, fuel deliveries and refining were disrupted, and many teachers walked off the job. Rallies are planned across France after more than 1.27 million people took part in the previous protests on January 31st. China set a modest target for economic growth this year of around 5% on Sunday as it kicked off the annual session of its National People's Congress, which is poised to implement the biggest government shake-up in a decade. China's gross domestic product grew by just 3% last year of its worst showings in decades, squeezed by 3 years of COVID-19 restrictions, crises in its vast property sector, a crackdown on private enterprises, and weakening demand for Chinese exports. In his work report, outgoing Premier Li Keqiang stressed the need for economic stability and expanding consumption, setting a goal to create around 12 million urban jobs this year, up from last year's target of at least 11 million, and warned that risks remain in the real estate sector. Li set a budget deficit target of 3% of GDP, widening from a goal of around 2.8% last year. This year's growth target of around 5% was at a low end of expectations, as policy forces had said a range as high as 6% could be set. It is also below last year's target of 5.5%. Li said China's armed forces should devote greater energy to training under combat conditions and boost combat preparedness. The budget included a 7.2% increase in defense spending this year, a slightly bigger increase than last year's budgeted 7.1% rise, and again exceeding expected GDP growth. China is also planning to lower the cost of childbirth, childcare, and education, and will actively respond to an aging population and decrease in fertility, the nation's state planner said in a work report released on Sunday. Still in Asia, Asian stocks pulled back on Tuesday as weak trade data weighed on Chinese stocks. Data on Tuesday showed China's exports and imports both fell sharply in the January to February, reflecting a slowdown in the global economy and weak domestic demand. That pushed Hong Kong's Hang Seng index down 0.76% and China's blue chip CSI 300 1.2% lower, erasing earlier gains. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan fell 0.3%, although the index was up 2.9% so far this month. Beyond China, investors' focus remains on the U.S. interest rate outlook. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is to give his testimony later in the day. Japan's Nikkei stock index rose 0.3%. Poorest nations poured out their disappointment and bitterness at a UN summit over the treatment of their countries by richer counterparts. Many made pointed calls for the developed powers to come to good with billions of dollars of promised aid to help them escape poverty and battle climate change. The story.
Worn down by growing debt and a barrage of crises, leaders of the world's poorest countries stepped up calls for the rules governing handouts of billions of dollars to be rewritten. According to the Organization for European Cooperation and Development, Western nations gave out more than $185 billion in grants and cheap loans in 2021. Official development assistance is one of the pillars of the international financial system. But the 46 least developed nations holding their own UN-organized summit in Doha this week feel shortchanged. 5 decades after this club was set up by the UN to organize trade privileges and easier access to other finance, presidents and prime ministers said their problems have piled up. Climate change, COVID-19 fallout, food and fuel price rises stoked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and ever bigger debts are weighing on the poor nations who are blaming the system. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has widened the attack when he condemned a global financial system designed by wealthy countries largely to their benefit. Without any cash reserves, poor nations were being forced to pay predatory interest rates. Coronavirus pandemic was also regularly cited at the summit. The UN Development Programme has estimated 52 countries were either suffering debt, stress, or close to it and in danger of default. China is now the biggest single creditor nation, often seen as rivaling Western influence, but recently indicating a willingness to work with the IMF and other institutions to organize debt relief.
Business and financial segment. Moving on to technology, where the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen urged for a quick agreement on the question of the future of the internal combustion engine by 2035 on Sunday, referring to Germany's voting behavior on European Union plans effectively banning the sale of new cars with combustion engines in its bid to cut planet warming emissions by 55% by 2030 from the 1990 levels. Von der Leyen and Chancellor Olaf Scholz stressed that they were in constructive talks on the issue, but did not give any further details. Background to the discussion is the German Liberal Party's resistance to agreeing to a ban on internal combustion vehicles by 2035 at EU level. A vote among the 27 EU governments had to be postponed because Germany would not have agreed. According to Transport Minister Volker Wissing, the proposal promised by the EU Commission on how climate-friendly fuels, so-called e-fuels, could be used in internal combustion engines by 2035, and not only in small quantities, is still missing. Scholz and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned China not to supply weapons to Russia. Everyone agreed that this should not happen, said Scholz in Meseberg. However, China's government had also promised not to supply any weapons that would cause death. So far, there was no evidence that China is doing so, according to von der Leyen. China will further expand the 5G network coverage to greater width and depth while pushing forward the research and development of 6G technology, according to Jin Zunlong, the Minister of Industry and Information Technology, MIIT, on Sunday. Speaking in an interview after the opening meeting of the first session of the 14th National People's Congress in Beijing, Jin said more than 2.9 million 5G base stations in total will be in service across the country by the end of 2023. In 2021, the MIIT, together with 9 other departments, issued a 3-year action plan aimed at coordinating 5G integration and application and fostering new drivers of economic and social development. Jin said the ministry will review and promote the successful practices of 5G applications to push forward the progress of 6G development. Moving to the world of arts and culture, starting off with the Egyptian antiquities officials announcing on Thursday the discovery of a hidden 9-meter-long corridor behind the main entrance of the Great Pyramid of Giza that they said could lead to further findings. Here's the story.
A new find was made under the Scan Pyramids project that since 2015 has been using modern technology, including scans and endoscopes, to peer inside the pyramid, the last of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing. The unfinished corridor was likely built to relieve the weight of the pyramid on either the main entrance, 7 meters below, or on another as yet undiscovered chamber or space, according to Dr. Mustafa Waziri, head of the Egyptian Supreme Council for Antiquities. A 9-meter-long and 2.10-meter-wide corridor behind the Great Pyramid of Giza, known as Khufu Pyramid, was discovered and announced by the Egyptian Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, Ahmed Isa, at a press conference in front of the Khufu Pyramid. He noted the discovery is a result of the International Scan Pyramids project that was launched in 2015 by the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities to study the structure of the pyramids without using harmful drilling methods. An international team consisting of experts from Egypt, France, Germany, Canada and Japan has been working on analyzing a cavity behind the pyramid's north face that was first discovered in 2016. Scientists used non-invasive and non-destructive surveying techniques called Muon's radiography. The discovered passage was likely designed to help relieve the weight of the vast structure of the 4,500-year-old pyramid, which was built as a royal burial chamber. The Great Pyramid was built as a monumental tomb around 2560 BC during the reign of the pharaoh Khufu. It stands at a height of 146 meters, the tallest structure built by humankind until the Eiffel Tower in Paris in 1889.
And joining us over the phone to tell us more about this discovery is Ahmed Nicola, a tourism expert. Good evening to you, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you well.
Sir, why is the discovery of this new corridor very significant?
Well, always discoveries is significant. You know, the whole world is always passionate about the ancient Egyptian history. So whenever something new happens, even us as Egyptians, we are always curious about what's new, what is there, and that can, if that's applied to the whole world. So people get more passionable to see and come and see what's new in the Egyptian civilization.
Yes. Sir, the pyramids of Giza are something that's obviously very old, and finding the tombs in there or corridors there is also an old discovery. Why now did we find a new corridor? Why was it hidden? I mean, how was it hidden, rather?
It wasn't actually hidden, you know, because our old, the pharaonic civilization is huge. And you can say it's the biggest, it was the biggest in the world. So wherever you dig here in Egypt, you'll find history.
Yes.
So all over the world there is always missionaries trying to find more objects and temples and graves here in Egypt. And actually it is happening. In Saqqara lately, there was something very important that was discovered. In Luxor, West Bank, there was a new temple, a new tomb that was discovered.
Yes.
And even in Elminia, yesterday, we had something new. Wherever you dig in this ancient land, you will find history.
Sir, do you believe that this discovery of the corridor could possibly lead to another chamber of a royal tomb?
The pyramid, we all know that we did not discover the pyramid up till now. The new hole is a breakthrough in this huge mystery, but we still didn't find the core of the Great Pyramid up till today. And we are hoping, but step by step, clue by clue, we might one day find the real chamber of King Cheops.
Yes. So, sir, do you believe that the other pyramids and all these three pyramids will basically lead to more corridors or more passages?
I believe so. All the Egyptologists are quite sure that we did not yet discover everything about the pyramids, especially the three great pyramids of Giza. Everybody is working hard by ultrasonic, by waves, by everything to find where the other chambers of the pyramids is hidden. And today or this week that we had this new hole discovered is a step in the way. And hopefully one day we will know what's the big mystery behind this magnificent structure, the Great Pyramid.
Yes, hopefully we will. My final question for you, sir. The Gem Museum is highly anticipated thing that will open, and the entire world is waiting for the grand opening of the museum itself. When, sir, do you expect it to open, and do you think that there will be some sort of parade done for it, just like the Mummy's Parade?
The information that I have up till today is first that there is a primary opening for the outside halls and some areas of the museum. This is going to be open this week and open for visits with tickets and everything. Even this, although it's not showing the most important parts of the museum, but the demand is already there for this.
Yes, it is.
And we're hoping that it, but concerning the opening, the most common words about this is end of this year.
Yes.
What we know is the museum is already finished, it's already done. But now we are finalizing the areas around the museum.
Yes.
The underground, the station, the roads, the way in and the way out, which is very important. You cannot open such a big establishment and without having the accessing to it easy. And the concerning the demand, I can tell you that on daily basis we have questions about when is the museum, how are we going to visit it. There is people like postponing their trip to Egypt, waiting for the day when this museum will be open.
Hopefully it will be sometime this year. Mr. Ahmed Nicola, tourism expert, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. A total of 100,000 lit candles illuminated the Thai temple of Potan Thani on Monday, honoring Buddha on the Makabaka Day. Here's the story. And for the first time since 2 years, Haiti's due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Makaya temple has fully opened for thousands of worshippers dressed in white attire and monks to participate in the ritual ceremony. 2,000 monks across Asia joined the event, lighting up 100,000 candles. And in this tradition, the temple's light is representative of wisdom, holiness, and kindness. Devotees also expressed feelings about feeling in the event and how they were excited that after a few years of a hiatus, they were able to do this event live when in the last year they had done it online. And this made them feel nostalgic for the light of a candle and seeing other devotees lighting it up differently. And normally, when they are doing it online, they couldn't walk together or experience the atmosphere as a group. But now that they can, they are excited and happy to do so. Makabak Day commemorates the day when 1,250 monks gathered to be ordained by Buddha more than 2,500 years ago. Sports news, and starting off with Chelsea hosting high-flying Dortmund, who have won all 11 matches they have played in 2023 on Tuesday off the back of a first win in 7 weeks. Under fire Chelsea coach Graham Potter says he and his players are excited by the task of overturning a 1-0 deficit against Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League last 16. Graham Potter's side need to claw back a 1-0 deficit from the first leg of Stamford Bridge on Tuesday. Chelsea produced their first win in 7 weeks, a stuttering 1-0 victory over struggling Leeds United on Saturday. Applause replaced the jeers of previous weeks, and players wreathed in smiles hugged each other as they left the pitch. Potter, who took over last September, has been under enormous pressure after a string of sparkless defeats and colourless draws. The club, under American Todd Boehly and the consortium, spent some £300 million in January transfer window, adding to the expectations to succeed. But Potter has had trouble turning his expensive array of talent into an effective attacking force. Scoring 24 goals in 25 games is not a strike rate expected of a club used to flying high in the Premier League, who won the Champions League as recently as 2021. The balance of power had supposedly shifted from Liverpool to Manchester United, with the arch-rivals heading in opposite directions, but that theory was blown to bits on Sunday. Liverpool have had bragging rights over United pretty much since Jurgen Klopp walked into Anfield in 2015, winning the Premier League, Champions League, both domestic cups and more. But this season, Klopp's golden era seemed to be in decline, with Liverpool a shadow of their best, while United under Erik ten Hag appeared to be on the rise, and last week won the League Cup, their first silverware since 2017. On Sunday, however, Liverpool's record 7-0 rot of the visitors reduced United's newfound swagger to a stagger. It more or less killed off any hopes United had of mounting a title charge in the last month of the season, while hoisting Liverpool into fifth spot and firmly back in the hunt for a top four finish that had looked unlikely earlier in the season. Klopp could hardly stop smiling as he saluted the delirious Liverpool fans at a rocking Anfield, and who could blame him? Liverpool's biggest ever win over United, courtesy of braces from Mohamed Salah, Cody Gakpo and Darwin Núñez, and a late effort of Roberto Firmino. Liverpool have now won 4 of their last 5 league games after a run of 3 defeats in 4, and while retrieving a 5-2 first-leg defeat by Real Madrid in the Champions League last 16 might be beyond them, they look to be back on track. Klopp paid tribute to Salah, who became Liverpool's record scorer in the Premier League, with his double taking him 129 ahead of Robbie Fowler from 61 fewer games. United arrived at Anfield unbeaten in 11 games, including their League Cup victory and a come-from-behind win over West Ham in the FA Cup. And finally, Danish rider Mats Pedersen won stage 2 of the Paris-Nice to take the yellow jersey of the race leader from Tim Riller. The rider edged out Dutchman Olaf Koyej and a fellow Dane Magnus Kort in the sprint finish after the 164-kilometer stage. UAE Team Emirates rider Tadej Pogačar of Slovenia took the late intermediate sprint and 6 bonus seconds for the second day in a row to move into second place in the general classification. Stage 1 winner Belgium's Merler of Sodal Quickstep finished 14th to drop a 3rd overall. Tuesday's third stage is a 32.2-kilometer team time trial. Well, this brings us to the end of this episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. Hope you enjoyed this episode, but stay tuned for more here on Nile TV.